Today we're going to talk about temperature. Basically, what temperature is, why we have to learn it, why is it useful, and how do we calculate temperature, and what are the ways in which temperature is calculated. Okay. So, in a nutshell, temperature basically is the measure of how hot or cold something is, right? In an every day to day context. There is a scientific explanation for it, but we're not going to go. We're gonna keep things simple with this definition, right? Because we want to keep it intuitive for us to understand, right? And like basically, something that a child would be able to understand. So, essentially, temperature is the measure of how hot or cold something is, in a nutshell. Something is, right? For example, you put your hand. An intuitive understanding of this would be like if you put your hand on, like say you turn your stove on, you put your hand on the stove, you could tell that if I put my hand over the stove, that eventually, and if the stove is on, that eventually my hand's gonna get hot, right? If I go outside and it's snowing, right, I'm gonna feel this sense of cold, right? Temperature basically tells us it's the measurement of how do we perceive, or how do we, you know, perceive this thing called hot or this thing called cold, right? Now, we can measure temperature, right, using this thing called a thermometer, right? So I don't have one with me, but basically a thermometer looks something like this. It's like this little cylinder looking thing with, like, it has these little scales, and it has like this little red thing that tells us how hot or cold something is, right? Right? It has this little like thing here that tells us how hot, and it has a little, so 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, so on and so forth, right? Right? We have this little thing. This thing is called a thermometer. A thermometer is a type of scale that is used to measure temperature. It's a scale that's used to measure temperature. Now, they have small thermometers that, like, if you go, like, for example, like when a child is sick, they have these little small thermometers that you can use to measure a person's body temperature, like in the case of like when a child has a fever, right? And you also have large thermometers. Large thermometers are used like when you want to measure like the temperature of a home, for example, right? They actually nowadays have these little digital temperatures that actually show you like just directly what the how hot or cold something is by just directly showing you like what the temperature scale is. Like they don't even show you the little red thing anymore. But essentially, the thermometer is a scale, right? They have small ones, they have large ones, right? Now, when we measure temperature, right? Temperature is measured in degrees. Okay, this little circle thing at the top is a thing called a degree. It's measured in degrees. Okay, so when we say, well, it's 90 degrees outside, or it's 80 degrees outside, or it's 50 degrees, right? We measure things using this thing called a degree. This little circle thing is a thing called a degree. But what the context of temperature depends on which scale we're using, right? Technically, there's actually there's actually three forms of temperature scaling, right? You have Fahrenheit, we have Celsius, and we have this thing called kelvins. Now, in this video, we're not going to go over kelvins, and the reason why we're not going to go over kelvins is because kelvins is for every day-to-day for our every day-to-day understanding of temperature. Kelvins are not necessarily used. They're not used. Kelvins is used in like science. Like if you want to see kelvins, like if you were to take physics, you would see Kelvin, and maybe if you take like biology, maybe you take biology, but you're definitely going to see kelvins if you take like physics, right? But for our every day-to-day understanding of temperature is measured in Fahrenheit and Celsius. Okay. Now, to be more specific, right? Fahrenheit is used again because the United States tries to be different from the rest of the world. Fahrenheit is primarily used in the United States and England. Right? And the metric system based on experience, based on traveling. The Celsius system is used every place else besides the United States and England from my own experience traveling, right? So the Celsius is used everywhere else besides the United States. Okay, so for this reason, and kelvins is used in science. Is used in like science. Okay, is used in science. That isn't to say that Fahrenheit and Celsius aren't used in science also. It's just that it's for the everyday practical person understanding temperature, we're not gonna use kelvins, because kelvins talks about things being at absolute zero, and that's not a concept. This is not an everyday to day concept for most people, right? Because most things in our universe, except when you're talking about space, has some type of temperature measurement. So we're going to talk about Fahrenheit and Celsius, right? So Celsius is based Fahrenheit. If you go to the United States and you were to look, like you were to turn your TV and you were to look at like the weather, they would usually refer to things being in Fahrenheit, right? And they would say something like, like it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside, or it's, it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit outside, right? Fahrenheit is based on the idea that that 32 degrees Fahrenheit is the freezing point of water. It's the freezing point of water, right? And that 212 degrees Fahrenheit is the boiling point of water. Right? So if you were to take a thermometer that has a Fahrenheit like scale to it, and let's say if you were to take this little thermometer, right, and you were to put it in like a pot of water, right, and let's say you were to turn the water on, and you were to keep the thermometer in the water until the water boils, you will find that if you put this thermometer in the water until the water boils, the thermometer is going to read 212 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is the boiling point of water, right? Likewise, right, if we were to take the water and we were to cool it, right, to the point where it becomes like ice, we will see that the point in which the water starts to become ice is at 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so the United States and England uses the Fahrenheit scale to indicate like that 30, like anything below, like once you reach 32 degrees Fahrenheit, that's when like something is cold. And if obviously if something is higher than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, then it's hot, right? So when they say something like on the news, and they say something like it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Then we know, okay, like it's not, like it's kind of cold outside, right? If we were to say 80 degrees Fahrenheit, we know that it's kind of warm. We know that it's kind of like a sunny day, right? If you say 90 degrees Fahrenheit, we know that it's like a hot day, right? Now, the body temperature of the human body is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, right? So we know that relative to our body temperature, the body temperature of humans, we have an internal body degree temperature of 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. You learn this from biology, right? So we know that if it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit outside and we have an internal body temperature of 98.6 degrees, then relative to us, we know that it's hot outside, right? If likewise, if you were to say, well, it's 40 degrees Fahrenheit outside, then we know that relative to our own body temperature, that it's cold outside, right? That's the thing with Fahrenheit. Right? Now, like I said, Fahrenheit is used in the United States, but when you leave the United States, you will find that every place else doesn't use Fahrenheit; they use Celsius, right? That isn't to say that if you look at the news, that news in the United States don't use Celsius, but people don't usually refer to the temperature in the United States using Fahrenheit. Using Celsius. They just don't, because in our system, in the system of the United States, they don't really use the metric system. Celsius is based over the metric system, in which 0 degrees. This is the Celsius system. Celsius is a type of temperature scaling that is used to refer to when 0 degrees is the reference point to determine that is the freezing point of water. Right? And 100 degrees is the boiling point. Of water, right? Because again, when you're dealing with things with the metric system, you're using things based off of the base 10 system, right? So, if you were to look at news, right? If you were to look at news abroad, or you were to look at news, if you were to go away from the United States and you were to look at a news broadcast abroad, they usually, or you were to look at a temperature abroad, you would find that they don't use Fahrenheit, right? They use Celsius. And for somebody who is not necessarily used to using Fahrenheit, that's not used to using Celsius, that may cause some confusion, because you may not necessarily know, when you look at the temperature, how hot or cold something is, right? It's important to be able to convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius, right? It's important to be able to convert so that when you go into these different places and you deal with these type of situations, you know how to convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius. To do the conversion, between Fahrenheit and Celsius, right? You have to do F is equal to 9/5 C plus 32, where F is Fahrenheit and C is Celsius, right? So basically, this is what you would see in a more advanced study of math, that this is something called an equation, and that basically, if we want to know how to convert between Fahrenheit, so given the fact that we know one form of temperature, we can find out how to convert into the other temperature scaling if we know what the first one is, right? So, for example, let's say we know the Celsius, right? And let's say we know that, let's just say the Celsius is 30 degrees Celsius, right? And we want to convert into Fahrenheit. So what we would do is we would say, okay, well, we input it into the equation. We do 9/5 of 30 plus 32, right? And then we say, okay, well, let's do the calculation, right? Well, 9 times 30 is 270, right? 270 divided by 5 plus 32, right? Because we're multiplying the fraction. This then becomes, let me see, 27 times 10 for 5, 2. This is 54 plus 32. Right, so what's 54 plus 32? Well, 54 plus 32 is 86. So we know that it's 86 degrees Fahrenheit. That when it's 30 degrees Celsius is 86 degrees Fahrenheit outside, right? We know this. Okay, let's use another example. Let's say the news, said that it's 20 degrees Celsius outside, right? Let's say the Celsius degrees is 20 degrees. And we want to know how much is it in Fahrenheit. So we input it, right? Okay, 5 goes into 24 times. 9 times 4 is 36. What's 36 plus 32? Okay, 68. So we know that it's 68 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Okay, so it's not too hot outside, right? The first example is kind of hot, it's like a summer day or spring or summer day. And we know that in this one, it's a little bit chilly, right? So we have to wear like a coat if it's 68 degrees, right? Now, let's say, for example, we know the Fahrenheit, right? We know the Fahrenheit, but we want to convert into Celsius, right? There's actually two ways to do it, right? For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to go into the other conversion equation. And the only reason why I'm saying that because you can deduce that from just doing the first equation. So there is another formula for it, but it's kind of pointless to do it because you could just do it from just this first equation, F equals 9/5 C plus 32, right? So let's say we know the Fahrenheit, but we want to convert into Celsius. So let's say the Fahrenheit is 100, right? And we want to convert into Celsius, right? So then we just say, okay, well, 100 is equal to 9/5 C plus 32, right? We're trying to solve for C, so we have to subtract by 32 on both sides, right? So what's 100 minus 32? 100 minus 32 is how much? 68. Okay, this becomes 9/5 C, right? Now, when we're trying to get the C by itself, we have to find the reciprocal of 9/5 C, which means that it's 5/9. So then we do C equals to 5/9 of 68, right? And then we do the calculation because in order for us to find C by itself, we have to do the reciprocal of C. We have to do the reciprocal of 9/5. So we do 5/9 of C, right? And then figure that out, and then let's see, what's 68 times 5? It's 340, and then divided by 9 is what? 9 goes to the 34, 3 times 27, 7, 0. 9 goes into 70, 9 times 10 to 6, 9 times 5 is 37, 7 times, that's 63, 7. So it's about 37.7 or about 38. So it's about 38 degrees Celsius, something like that, right? We can do this from deduction, right? The formula to convert between Fahrenheit to Celsius, to find the Celsius, it would be let me see, F. We can convert it like this, right? This is the method of conversion. F is equal to 9/5 C plus 32. But if you want to find C by itself, we have to isolate C, which means that we have to take this, subtract it, right? So it becomes F minus 32 equals 9/5 C, right? But because we have this little 9/5 here, if we're trying to get C by itself, we have to take the reciprocal. So when we take the reciprocal, remember the reciprocal of a fraction is the inverse, is the multiplicative inverse of the fraction. So when we take 9/5 times 5/9, this gives us 45 over 45, which is 1, right? So this cancels out. So now, but remember, we got to do this on both sides. So this becomes 5/9 F minus 32 equals to C. So the Celsius conversion is 5/9 F minus 32. Okay, we didn't use it in the previous example because we don't necessarily have to. We can still use the same equation. It's just that, you know, we can deduce the equation. We can deduce it from like if we had to, but we don't have to do it, right? But I guess some places will show, I guess some places will show this formula. So I guess it's important for you to know it, but you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. Okay. So that's it. So basically, in a nutshell, because this video is getting long. So basically, in a nutshell, we want to know that essentially temperature is the measure of how hot or cold something is. It's important to recognize that the two most commonly used forms of temperature is Fahrenheit and Celsius. Kelvins is used, but you will find that you would see kelvins more in like a physics course or like a science course where they use kelvins. And in every day-to-day context, temperature is used in Fahrenheit and Celsius. The United States primarily uses Fahrenheit. Celsius is used for the most part throughout most of the world. If you want to measure temperature, you will measure temperature using a scale, using a thermometer, which is a type of scale that they use to measure temperature. You can buy one you can buy a little mini one for your child, you know, if you're sick. They have little mini ones that you use to look at your body temperature. And if you want to buy a large one, you can buy a large one to measure your home. And that basically, in a nutshell, temperature is measured in degrees. That is based off of the freezing point of water and the boiling point of water. And that if you want to convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius, we can do so if we know what the formula for Fahrenheit and Celsius is, right? So in this video, I used the formula for Fahrenheit, F equals 9/5 C plus 32, to illustrate that the Fahrenheit is, to illustrate how to convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius. And that I did show the formula for the Celsius and how to convert between Fahrenheit, but I didn't use it because you don't really have to use it really to convert, right? Just understand that F is equal to 9/5 C plus 32, and that we can convert between Fahrenheit and Celsius using just this formula alone. But I just showed it just in case, you know, if, you know, you do see it at one point or another. So that's it. That's it. Thank you, and have a nice day. Bye-bye.